not vote for that. I do not think that's what the voters want. It's devastating.
The county wants to cut our school funding. I don't think that anyone voted for that.
Do you mind if I ask who you voted for in the election?
I voted for Donald Trump.
80% of this county did vote for Donald Trump in November. But that doesn't mean that they believe that anything will be cut here.
I have to take responsibility for my personal vote that enabled that. I have to say I wasn't paying attention. I should have been and I wasn't. There's a lot of reasons for that, but and I regret that. Obviously now, trying to take responsibility for that and own it publicly.
After Trump won, I knew I made a huge mistake. A lot of guilt and genuine shame. Probably gonna get some understandable hate for this. Hello, guys.
Take the Department of Education, close it. I'm going to close it.
USA Today is reporting this evening that Trump's going to issue an executive order tomorrow to shut down the U.S. Department of Education, something that roughly 2/3 of the American public is opposed to.
Breaking news. Trump is signing an executive order to close the Department of Education today. This is disastrous for families across America. It means less funding for schools in working class neighborhoods. It means that if you have a kid who has special needs or disabilities, you will not get funding for IEP programs. It means no student loan administration for those people who rely on the federal government for loans. We need to stand up for the Department of Education and not let Donald Trump shut it down.
Every public school teacher is acutely aware of how devastating eliminating the Department of Education would be on public school students. Whether or not you'd be willing to admit that in a political argument is a personal choice. Sure, if you're a small government girly, you would think, well, kicking it to the states and eliminating the Department of Education sounds like a great idea. But as a public school teacher, you know that the first thing that's going to happen when we kick it to the states is that they're going to eliminate funding for special services. And the first students that are going to be affected are disabled students, poor students, black and brown students, any student that is in need of special services. I shudder to think that there are Republican special ed teachers that understand the nuance of this conversation and still choose to ignore the facts. I shudder to think that those same teachers watched a president for 4 years mock and make fun of disabled people in front of cameras and still vote for him a second and third time. And after knowing everything about what your party wants to do to public schools, when asked why you still decide to vote for the Republican Party and for Donald Trump, your answer is, I don't vote on issues of education. I look at the bigger picture. We're not buying that anymore. We're not buying it. Not buying it because your presidential candidate and your Republican Party hangs their hat so much on issues of education. Such a huge part of their platform this year is dismantling the Department of Education, and they know how important and how impactful that decision would be on our children. To sit there as a public school teacher and say, well, I just don't really care about those issues, I'm going to ignore them. Whatever mental gymnastics you're doing in your head about what it means to dismantle the DOE, that move means eliminating accountability measures, any national academic standards that exist, any and all civil rights protections for our students and our teachers, and most nefariously, eliminating all education experts from federal government, which is exactly what they want. They don't want anybody in a position of power being able to say, actually, this is not best practice for our students. This is going to cause negative outcomes for our students, especially for our students in need.
Tricking so many Americans into believing that getting rid of the Department of Education is a good thing has got to be one of the most heinous crimes against Americans. The marginal dollars that you think you're going to save, which, by the way, you're not, what a joke. Education, access to education, access to resources that enable education is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. To strip that away from people, it's disgusting. I'm smiling, but it's not funny, and I actually genuinely feel bad for those people. This is not one of those, like, dancing on your grave kind of things. No, I feel so bad for you.
Donald Trump is dismantling the Department of Education. He has ordered the department head to fire half of the employees in the Department of Education. Now, if you don't know what the Department of Education does, then let me enlighten you, because I'm sure that the Magas on the right are super excited about this, and they believe that the Department of Education should be closed and that all the decisions based on curriculum and education should be left up to the states. Well, let me tell you what the Department of Education does. The Department of Education ensures that every student has a fair and equal opportunity to a public education. The Department of Education ensures that all students are treated equally and are not discriminated against based on any disability, race, or gender. The Department of Education provides funding for programs that help students with disabilities and students that are minorities. The Department of Education also provides loans, scholarships, and grants to students who are seeking higher education and going to college. The Department of Education is trying to ensure that every child gets an equal chance at an education.
Send education back to the states, but what would sending education back to the states actually look like? None of what I'm about to lay out for you makes any sense unless you're operating under the assumption that his goal is to collapse the public school system. His priority number one is certainly getting rid of the Department of Education, but before he even touches that, he is probably going to create a list of approved and unapproved topics that teachers can teach in the classroom. This is solely just to create the illusion that he is tackling the topic that Republican parents are most concerned about, which is woke liberal indoctrination. And secondarily, it's to intimidate teachers and school districts into believing that they have to align with his agenda, and to make them believe that he has the direct power to withhold funding and take their job away. He's already gone on the record saying that he wants to defund schools that don't teach approved topics. That's exactly the precedent he's going to try and establish on day one. Then he's going to make an official announcement that the Department of Education will be closed down. Even though this process might take a long time, the announcement itself serves as a threat. As soon as it actually is dissolved, the first thing that's going to happen is Title I funding and special education funding will either be diverted or completely eliminated. Once the Department of Education is dissolved, it might be one guy and a secretary in a room like Trump keeps talking about, but most likely what will happen is the responsibilities of the Department of Education will be delegated to other agencies in the federal government. And states that were receiving federal funding from the Department of Education might now receive that in the form of block grants, or might not receive any funding at all. The DOE also regulates these funds, so now that states don't have any regulating agency, they can just do whatever they want with the money. They're going to start diverting special education and Title I funding in record amounts. We're not spending that money on our students at all. We already know that, for example, the Texas Education Agency was fined $33.3 million for non-compliance of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. They underspent on our special education students by $41 million. Republican-led states, when given the chance, will always underspend on our students, and without regulation, this will happen in disgusting amounts. State education agencies will also feel entirely emboldened to begin manipulating learning standards and curriculum to the point where it aligns so closely with Donald Trump's agenda that it's indistinguishable. These changes will be so far outside of the norm, but they will feel safe to do so, safe to, for example, tell teachers that they're not allowed to teach about slavery anymore, because there's no one to tell them no, and they also know that they can push it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they are protected. And the key here is that the federal government doesn't have anything to do right now with setting learning standards and curriculum. It already is up to the states. But after Trump takes power, they will feel safe enough to put whatever they want in those learning standards. Let me just rapid fire some other things that we're likely to see. Do you value the library and your fine arts programs at your child's school? You can consider those gone. I mean, funding for will absolutely cave, which means teachers are unsafe. Teachers are absolutely unsafe in a Trump presidency, no matter who they voted for. Any efforts to provide students with equitable learning opportunities will become too cost prohibitive. So if you have a kid that has an IEP or a 504, you can chuck that right out the window. Special needs students will immediately lose access to resources like behavioral specialists, mental health professionals, communication aid devices. The end road of this is that special needs students will become institutionalized instead of being given access to a free and appropriate public school education. Title I schools in some of our most economically disadvantaged areas with the highest concentration of black and brown students will be so underfunded that they will have to shut down or consolidate. And students from lower middle class families will suffer. And teaching salaries will stagnate or get restructured to the point where it will drive away all the high quality teaching candidates from the public school system. We're already seeing that now in some places places like Houston, where in Houston ISD, Mike Miles, the superintendent, restructured the pay system to where some teachers are now getting paid less than they got last year just because of what subject they teach. New charter schools and religious private schools with overinflated tuition will pop up in record numbers. You can guarantee that any existing private or charter school is going to raise the price of their tuition to match the value of any voucher that a parent gets from the state. Eventually, all lower middle class families will be completely priced out of formalized K-12 education. And because of the funding crisis this creates, the average American family is going to be forced to homeschool their child when their local public school that's within a reasonable distance of them gets shut down. Millions of Americans will be forced to exit the workforce in order to homeschool their child, mostly women. And then finally, formalized K-12 education will become something that is reserved only for the ultra-wealthy. And within a generation's time, what we know as public school will devolve into just a scattering of homeschool co-ops throughout the country that are funded by local municipalities instead of the state. They want to cut off equal and fair access to public school education to black and brown students, disabled students, and poor students. They want to make money off of our school system and off of our children. They want to force underpaid teachers to teach incorrect history and science and the Bible.
Teachers for Trump right now, they are regretting the way they voted. They are literally recording themselves and say they wish they can go back in time and change the way they vote. Unfortunately, once you do something, you can never go back in time and say, I'm gonna rewind. It doesn't happen like that. It only happens in the movies. That is the reality. So we are here where we are as a result of the way people voted, and that is it's painful, but it's the reality. So what can the teachers do? Nothing. Right now, the current administration, they have put a policy in place that is saying they are defunding the public sector, so the public education sector. So who is going to be affected? Families that come from lower class, families that come from poor families, families that come from the middle class, lower class. Those are the ones who are going to be affected. How? When they defund the public education sector, those schools, those public schools that come from the regions where middle class, lower, poor families live, most of these high quality teachers are going to leave teaching because they are being paid less than what they're worth. That is the reality. When there is no money, when a school is operating and there is no a lot of money circulating in the school, usually what they do, they usually cut down the prices, the salaries of teachers, so that the remaining money can go to other departments, school activities, so that the students can have something to do with other projects. Unfortunately, teachers need money to survive in the economy of America. Everything is expensive. So if you tell a teacher, you know what, I'm going to cut your salary times 2 or times 3, of course, what's going to happen? This teacher is going to look at her surrounding or his surrounding and realize, you know what, I have bills to pay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for alternative schools that are going to pay me what I'm worth. And what kind of schools are those? Those are private schools. That is a reality. Those are private schools that are going to pay these high quality teachers what they're worth. And what's going to happen? These private schools, of course, when they see the demand for quality education is needed by the community at large, they're going to increase their prices. So who's going to be affected? The lower class families, the middle class families who cannot afford those expensive tuition, the poor family who cannot afford those too expensive tuition. And that is the reality. So very soon, if people are not careful, education is going to only benefit the rich kids, the kids who come from the rich families, and the people who come from the poor family, the kids who are coming from the poor family, they are going to be taught by their parents. They're going to be homeschooled, and as a result, if the parent is not careful or is not aware of what to teach their kids, this kid is going to be affected in the long run. And as a result, when this kid grows up, become an adult, is going to lose opportunities, whether it's job opportunities, whether it's knowing how to cultivate, earn money, save money, invest money, those skills that are going to help him to thrive and to grow and become a productive member of society in America. So education is paramount. Education is the biggest equalizer across the board for each and every person in the world, whether in America or other parts of the world. That's what they say. They usually say once a kid is educated and they take the education seriously, whether you're coming from a poor family, you can literally reach the pinnacle of the society as a result of that education you got. When you have education, usually they say knowledge is power. It usually helps people to come from poor families and end up becoming rich and break out that generation curse in the family and end up becoming maybe the first millionaire or even the first billionaire in the family and assist the whole family to thrive. That is the reality, and that is the power of education. So when they define this education department in America, is going to affect so many people, especially people come from the lower classes, the poor family, and of course the middle class people who cannot afford those expensive tuition. So those teachers right now, they're literally saying, you know what, we need to do something. We are so sorry how we voted. We wish we can go back to the back to in time and change the way we voted, but unfortunately it's not possible. So policies right now are being put in place. They are choosing the types of topics they're going to allow teachers to teach students. They are going to ban certain topics, especially like slavery, how it came about in America and all this stuff. They're going to ban them from teaching them in schools, and as a result, you know, most of the kids are going to learn things that are half correct or incorrect, and then when they go out there among the masses, they'll be like out of touch in certain situations. Especially when they say, you know, for you to prevent certain things from happening again is for you to know the correct history, especially what happened during the World War I, what happened during the World War II, what happened during the Holocaust. Usually people, the historians usually say, you know, you need to know your history, you need to know how things happen so that we avoid repeating the same mistake over and over and again. So America need to teach their kids, the kids need to learn the correct education so that it can help the kids when they grow up become adults, so that they don't end up repeating the same mistake that the ancestors did long time ago. So let me know what you think about this video. Drop your comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. Is what the current administration doing correct? How is it affecting you? All that, please let me know what you think and drop your comments. I'd love to hear from you, and subscribe to my channel. All right, bye bye.